In a crowded workshop, an engineer mocked a black mechanic, saying, "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." Everyone laughed, never expecting what happened next. The factory was a place where metal met fire, where ambition collided with sweat, and where human dignity was often tested under the weight of industry. It was the early morning shift, and the roar of engines echoed through the hangar-like workshop. Amelia stood in the center of it all. Her pale blue engineer's uniform pressed perfectly, her posture upright, her eyes sharp with the kind of confidence that made others step aside. She was young for her position, no more than 32, yet already renowned among her colleagues as one of the brightest mechanical engineers in the firm. She wore her authority like armor. The men around her respected her intelligence, though many whispered when her back was turned. For Amelia had broken two barriers that most could not stomach. She was not only a woman in an industry ruled by men, but she was also proud of it. Proud enough to demand respect in rooms that had never been meant for her. She carried herself with a defiance that unsettled those who were used to giving orders rather than receiving them from a woman. But Amelia, for all her pride, carried another shadow. Her brilliance was not without arrogance. She had grown accustomed to being the smartest in the room, the one who could silence a doubter with a swift calculation scribbled on paper or a spark of genius at the workbench. She rarely admitted defeat, and she never believed that anyone below her rank could outshine her. That was the morning when Ade walked into her world. Ade had been working at the plant for nearly 5 years, though few really saw him. To most, he was just the black mechanic. A man of dark skin, quiet strength, and hands that were perpetually stained with oil and grease. He had learned to keep his head down, to do his job without drawing too much attention. The supervisors gave him the dirtiest assignments, the jobs others would never touch, and he took them without complaint. But beneath his silence lived a storm. Ade was not uneducated, though they often treated him as if he were. He had studied mechanics informally since he was a boy, fixing broken bicycles in his village back in Nigeria, and later, learning the anatomy of engines with the same reverence others gave to scripture. When he immigrated, he carried with him not only hope but also knowledge, though America had little interest in seeing beyond the color of his skin. He worked twice as hard, spoke half as much, and waited for the moment when his worth could no longer be ignored. That moment arrived with a broken engine. It was not just any engine. It was the prototype that Amelia herself had designed. An ambitious, intricate piece of machinery meant to outperform every rival in the market. Investors were waiting for proof it could run smoothly. But after weeks of assembly, the engine failed. It coughed, sputtered, and died each time they tried to ignite it. Amelia had spent nights bending over the schematics, her confidence cracking with every failed attempt. The men in the workshop grew restless. Some whispered that perhaps she had reached beyond her limits. Others waited to see her fall. That morning, with her patience fraying, Amelia stood before the silent hulk of machinery, her arms folded tightly across her chest. "We'll strip it down again," she declared, her voice sharp, commanding. "There's a fault in the valve system. I'll find it." Ade, standing near the shadows, looked at the engine with different eyes. He had watched every step of its assembly. He had listened to the sounds it made, subtle but telling, when it first came alive. And now, he saw something others did not. Quietly, he stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low but steady. "It's not the valves. The alignment is off in the crankshaft. If you let me." The room fell silent. Men froze, eyes darting between Amelia and the black mechanic who had dared to speak. Amelia turned, her pale eyes narrowing with disbelief. And then, in front of everyone, she laughed. It was not a laugh of joy but of scorn. "You?" she said, her words dripping with condescension. "You think you can fix what I designed? You're a mechanic, Ade. I'm an engineer. There's a difference." A few men chuckled nervously. Ade's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had endured this kind of dismissal before, though each time it left a scar deeper than the last. Amelia, emboldened by the audience around her, went further. "Tell you what," she said, her voice rising with theatrical arrogance. "If you can fix this engine, if you can prove me wrong, I'll marry you." The workshop erupted in laughter. The men roared, slapping each other's backs, amused at the absurdity of her challenge. A black mechanic, marrying an engineer like Amelia? To them, it was nothing more than a cruel joke. But Ade did not laugh. He looked at her steadily, his eyes calm but unyielding. "Then let me try," he said simply. The laughter died down, replaced by murmurs. Something in his tone carried weight, a seriousness that unsettled even Amelia. But she masked her hesitation with pride. She gestured toward the engine with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Go ahead," she said. "Show us all what you can do." Ade stepped forward, the world around him fading until it was only him and the machine. His hands, though rough, moved with the precision of a surgeon. He tilted his head, listening to the language of the metal, sensing its imbalance. With each turn of the wrench, with each adjustment, the room grew quieter. Even Amelia found herself watching more closely than she intended, her chest tightening with an unfamiliar unease. Minutes passed. Then at last Ade straightened, wiped his hands on a rag and nodded. "Try it now," he said. The men exchanged skeptical glances. Amelia stepped forward, her hand hovering over the ignition. Her pride warred with her curiosity. Finally, she turned the key. The engine roared to life. Smooth, powerful, flawless. The silence that followed was deafening. Amelia stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the machine that had mocked her for weeks, and now purred like a living thing under Ade's touch. She felt the weight of 100 stares pressing against her. The laughter was gone, replaced by something far heavier. Ade did not gloat. He simply looked at her, his expression steady, his dignity unshaken. "A machine does not care who fixes it," he said softly. "Only that it runs." And in that moment, something shifted, not just in the air of the workshop, but in the heart of Amelia herself. The engine's roar still echoed in the workshop when silence fell over the men. No one moved. The machine that had defied Amelia for weeks now obeyed the hands of a man many had dismissed as little more than labor. The irony was not lost on them. The laughter that had filled the air moments earlier now clung to their throats, replaced by unease. Amelia stood frozen, her hands still resting on the ignition. The triumph she had longed for was not hers. The embarrassment burned like fire beneath her skin, more painful because she knew the truth. Ade had seen what she could not. Her mind raced with excuses, ways to reclaim authority. Perhaps he had guessed, perhaps it was luck, perhaps it was not as significant as it seemed. But deep down, a quieter voice whispered the thing she feared most. He was right. The men began to murmur, their eyes darting between her and Ade. One of them chuckled bitterly. "Guess the mechanic outsmarted the engineer," he muttered. The words rippled through the room like a spark. Amelia's jaw clenched. Her authority was slipping. She straightened her shoulders, forcing composure. "It's temporary," she said, her voice steady but cold. "The alignment might hold for now, but without understanding the design, it won't last. We'll see how long it runs." It was a fragile attempt to protect her pride. But Ade did not argue. He simply nodded, wiped his hands, and stepped back into the shadows. He had no need for applause. His dignity was not built on their approval. Still, the eyes of the workshop followed him. For the first time, the men saw not just a mechanic but a craftsman, a man whose knowledge ran deeper than grease-stained hands. And for Amelia, the image of his calm defiance would not leave her. Later that afternoon, she sat in her office, staring at the schematics spread across her desk. The sound of the engine still played in her memory, smooth and unwavering. How had he known? How had he seen what she had overlooked? She prided herself on precision, on being the one who could solve problems others could not. Yet Ade, with no formal degree, had touched the heart of her machine and brought it to life. Her pride wrestled with her reason. Part of her wanted to dismiss him, to reduce his success to chance. But another part, deeper, more honest, felt a stirring of respect. She hated the thought, but she could not escape it. The next day, the engine still ran perfectly. Every test Amelia conducted confirmed its flawless performance. The murmurs among the workers grew louder. Some mocked her failure, but others whispered admiration for Ade. His quiet triumph unsettled the hierarchy of the workshop. It was then that Amelia did something she rarely did. She sought him out. She found him in the far corner of the workshop, bent over another piece of machinery. His sleeves were rolled up, his arms strong from years of labor, his focus unwavering. For a moment, she watched him silently. There was something almost poetic in the way he worked, as if the machines trusted him. "Ade," she said at last. He looked up, his eyes steady, giving no sign of resentment, though she had humiliated him before. "Yes, ma'am." She hesitated. The words did not come easily. "About yesterday, you were right." He wiped his hands on a rag, studying her carefully. "Engines don't lie," he said simply. Her lips tightened. "I suppose not." A pause lingered between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally she added, "You surprised me." A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or disbelief. "You didn't think I could?" She bristled, her pride reflexively rising. "I underestimated you." Ade tilted his head slightly, his tone calm but firm. "No, Amelia. You dismissed me. There's a difference." The words struck her harder than she expected. Few dared to speak to her so directly. But instead of anger, she felt an unfamiliar discomfort. Because he was right. She had laughed at him, mocked him in front of others, reducing his skill to a joke. And still, he stood before her without bitterness, without malice. That dignity unsettled her more than defiance ever could. She faltered, the admission heavy on her tongue. "Perhaps I owe you an apology." Ade said nothing. He simply returned to his work, as though her words mattered less than the machine before him. It was not disrespect. It was clarity. He did not seek validation from her. His worth did not depend on her recognition. And in that silence, Amelia felt the weight of her arrogance more sharply than any rebuke could deliver. Days turned into weeks. The engine continued to perform flawlessly, and the investors who once doubted Amelia now praised the success of her design. Though none knew it was Ade's adjustment that had made it possible. Amelia accepted the accolades, but each time, her eyes drifted toward the quiet mechanic in the corner. She could not forget the promise she had made so carelessly, in front of everyone. "If you can fix this engine, I'll marry you." At first, she dismissed it as a joke, a foolish remark made in arrogance. But the memory clung to her. The men had not forgotten either. They teased her, half in jest, half in malice. "When's the wedding, Amelia?" They laughed. "He's waiting for you." Each time, she forced a smile, dismissing it with cold disdain. Yet in private, she found herself unsettled, not because she feared their laughter, but because part of her began to wonder. What if the challenge she had thrown in scorn had revealed something deeper? Ade never mentioned it. He carried himself as though the words had never been spoken, but his silence made them echo louder in her own mind. She began to notice things she had ignored before. The steadiness in his gaze, the patience in his hands, the quiet strength that made others listen even when he said little. He was not the man she had imagined standing beside her, yet she could not deny the respect he commanded within her, despite her pride's resistance. One evening, As she left the workshop, she saw him walking home. His steps were unhurried, his posture upright, his presence calm. For reasons she could not explain, she followed him with her eyes until he disappeared from view. And in that moment, Amelia realized something that shook her more than failure ever had. The man she had mocked, the man she had thought beneath her, had left an imprint she could not erase. Whispers traveled quickly in the workshop. The promise Amelia had made in jest became the favorite subject of ridicule. Each day, someone found a way to mention it. A cruel laugh, a sly remark, a question asked just loud enough for Ade to hear. "When's the wedding, Amelia?" One of the men snickered. "He's already proved himself." Others chimed in, their laughter filling the air. "Maybe the mechanic's too good for you, Amelia. Maybe he's the one dismissing you now." Amelia ignored them outwardly, her face composed, but inside, their words struck chords she did not want to acknowledge. She had built her life on control. Control of her career, control of her reputation, control of her emotions. Yet Ade had become the one person she could not dismiss, the one presence that unsettled her carefully maintained order. For his part, Ade never responded to the taunts. He worked steadily, never breaking his rhythm, never lowering himself to their cruelty. His silence carried a weight heavier than words. Some men mistook it for weakness, but Amelia knew better. His restraint was strength. The more they mocked him, the more dignified he appeared in contrast. And that, she realized, was why the jokes cut her so deeply. One evening, she stayed late in the workshop, long after most had gone. Papers littered her desk, and the blueprints of her engine lay open, but her mind refused to focus. The sound of tools clicking drew her attention. Ade was still there, bent over a dismantled motor, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the hanging light. She watched him for a long moment. His movements were precise, deliberate, almost reverent. He treated the machine as though it had a soul, as though it deserved patience and respect. And Amelia felt something stir inside her. Not the pride of competition, nor the sting of humiliation, but something quieter, deeper. She stepped closer. "You always stay late," she said. Ade didn't look up. Engines don't fix themselves. And at night, the machines are honest. No noise, no laughter, just the truth of what they are. His words lingered in the air. Amelia crossed her arms, searching for something to say, but none of her usual sharpness seemed to fit. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she asked finally. He looked up then, meeting her gaze. "Tell them what? That you fixed the prototype. That it was your correction that made it run." A faint smile touched his lips. "It doesn't matter who gets the credit. The machine runs. That's enough." The simplicity of his answer disarmed her. For Amelia, recognition had always been fuel. Every success was a battle won. Every accolade a shield against those who doubted her. But here was a man who carried triumph without need of applause. His pride came not from others, but from within himself. "Doesn't it bother you," she pressed, "that they laugh at you?" Ade's expression hardened slightly. "They've been laughing since the day I arrived. At my accent, at my skin, at my silence. Laughter is nothing new." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "What matters is that I know who I am. They cannot take that from me." Something in his tone pierced her. Amelia, who had spent her life fighting to prove herself, realized that Ade's struggle had been far greater. She fought whispers of doubt, because she was a woman in a man's world. But Ade fought an entire system built to deny him dignity at every turn. And still, he stood with quiet strength. For the first time, Amelia felt small. Not because of failure, but because she recognized her arrogance for what it was. She had mocked him, dismissed him, reduced him to a caricature in front of others. And yet he held no bitterness. He gave her respect even when she had given him none. "Do you hate me for it?" she asked quietly, surprising even herself with the question. Ade studied her. His gaze was steady, unreadable. Then he shook his head. Hate is heavy. I don't carry it. The silence that followed was thick, filled with words neither dared to speak. Amelia's chest tightened, a strange mixture of shame and admiration swelling within her. She turned away quickly, afraid he might see more than she was ready to reveal. Days passed, and the workshop grew restless again. A new challenge arose. An engine from a client's fleet broke down, and no one could find the fault. The managers grew impatient. Amelia examined it for hours, frustration tightening her brow, while the men muttered about deadlines and failures. Finally, Ade stepped forward. "If you allow me," he said calmly, "I believe I know where the fault lies." The supervisor sneered. "Oh, here we go again. The mechanic thinks he's an engineer." Amelia looked at Ade, then at the broken engine. A week ago, she would have laughed with them. But now, she hesitated. His last correction had saved her design. Was she willing to ignore him again? She took a breath. "Let him try," she said firmly. The room fell silent. The men stared at her, disbelief etched on their faces. The supervisor scoffed, but stepped aside. Ade knelt by the machine, his hands moving with practiced care. Within minutes, he identified the fault. A cracked bearing that had gone unnoticed. He replaced it with quiet efficiency, then nodded for them to test it. The engine roared back to life. Smooth, steady, reliable. A hush fell over the workshop. The same men who had mocked him now exchanged uneasy glances. Amelia's eyes lingered on him, a warmth she tried to mask rising in her chest. That night, alone in her office, she replayed the day's events. For the first time, she did not feel the need to defend her authority. Instead, she felt something new. Gratitude. Gratitude for his knowledge, his patience, his resilience. And beneath it, a growing admiration that unsettled her more than anything else. Her promise, the careless words thrown in arrogance, echoed again in her mind. "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." It had been meant as a joke, a mockery. But now, it no longer felt like one. Amelia closed her eyes, her heart pounding. For the first time, she wondered not how to escape her words, but whether fate had hidden truth in them. The weeks that followed were restless ones for Amelia. Her life had once been simple, defined by blueprints and engines, by equations that bent to her will. But now, her thoughts were no longer filled only with machines. They circled back again and again to the man who had unsettled the foundations of her certainty. Ade remained steady, unchanged by the storm that swirled around him. Each day, he came to work, carried out his tasks, and left without complaint. He did not bask in the admiration of those who had begun to respect him, nor did he falter under the hostility of those who still resented him. He moved as if guided by an inner compass that nothing could break. But Amelia noticed everything. She noticed the way his silence carried weight in meetings where others blustered. She noticed the way he never bowed under mockery, but neither did he strike back. She noticed the way he treated the machines with gentleness, as though even metal deserved patience. And slowly, without her realizing it, she began to measure others by the quiet dignity she saw in him. The promise still lingered among the workers. It became a joke they repeated daily, some with laughter, others with malice. "When's the wedding, Amelia?" they taunted. "He's waiting for you." But as the words echoed through the factory, Amelia found herself less offended than before. The laughter of the men no longer stung her pride. Instead, it forced her to face a truth she had long resisted. The promise had not been a simple jest. It had revealed something about her. A prejudice, a blindness, a cruelty she could no longer deny. And Ade, by his strength, had forced her to confront it. One evening, after another long day, Amelia left the workshop to find Ade walking the same road home. The sky was painted with the fading hues of sunset, the air heavy with the scent of oil and steel. She quickened her pace until she was beside him. "You never said anything," she began softly. He glanced at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "About what?" "The promise. What I said. You never used it against me." Ade's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Because I don't need a promise to know my worth. Your words were for them, not for me." She stopped walking, struck by the simplicity of his answer. "But I mocked you. I laughed at you. I humiliated you." He turned to face her, his gaze steady. "And yet, here you are, walking beside me." Amelia felt her throat tighten. There were no calculations here, no formulas to untangle, only a truth she had avoided. Her pride had been shattered, and in its place, something far more dangerous had taken root. Admiration, respect, and beyond that, something she had not dared to name. Over the next weeks, her resolve deepened. She began to defend him openly in the workshop. When men mocked him, she silenced them. When supervisors dismissed him, she argued for him. At first, it was instinct, a way to repay the debt of her arrogance. But soon it became something more. A conviction that his brilliance deserved not just recognition, but honor. The backlash was swift. Some men scoffed at her defense, whispering that Amelia had lost her edge, that she was blinded by something unbecoming of an engineer. Others were more direct. "You'd shame yourself for him?" One spat. "A black mechanic? Do you know what they'll say about you?" Amelia met their scorn with the same steel she had once reserved for defending her own career. "Let them say what they will," she replied coldly. "I would rather stand with dignity than bow to prejudice." Her words spread, stirring both anger and admiration. For the first time, the workshop was divided, not just by class, but by conscience. One night, Amelia found herself alone again, staring at the blueprints that once defined her life. But the lines on the page felt empty compared to the truths she now wrestled with. She thought of Ade's calm, his quiet strength, his refusal to bow. She thought of how he had changed not only her engine, but her heart. She remembered the promise, the careless vow spoken in arrogance, and she realized it was no longer a joke. The next morning, she entered the workshop with her head held high. The men gathered as usual, their whispers buzzing like flies. She found Ade in his corner, working silently as always. Taking a breath, she spoke loud enough for all to hear. "Ade." He looked up, his expression calm. "You remember the words I spoke that day?" she said, her voice unwavering. "I mocked you. I challenged you. And you proved me wrong. I told you that if you fixed the engine, I would marry you." The room froze. Tools stopped clattering. Every eye turned to her. Ade's brow furrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Amelia stepped closer. "I spoke those words in arrogance, but I will not let them remain empty. You deserve more than laughter. You deserve honor. And if you will have me, Ade, I will keep my promise." The silence that followed was deafening. Some men gasped, others muttered in disbelief. A few laughed bitterly, unable to comprehend what they were hearing. But Amelia's eyes never left Ade's. He stood slowly, wiping his hands, his gaze steady. For a long moment, he studied her, searching for truth. And what he saw was not pity, nor condescension, but sincerity carved from humility. Finally he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the room. "Marriage is not a prize to be won from a wager, Amelia. It is built on respect. Do you respect me?" Her throat tightened. "Yes," she whispered, "more than anyone I have ever known." "Do you see me as your equal?" Her eyes glistened. "I see you as greater than me in the ways that matter most." Ade's expression softened, the faintest trace of warmth breaking through his calm. He nodded slowly. "Then I will have you." Gasps filled the workshop, some of outrage, some of astonishment. But Amelia felt only relief. Relief and something far deeper. The days that followed were not easy. Society did not welcome them with open arms. Whispers followed them in the streets, scorn shadowed their steps, and prejudice struck at every turn. But Amelia no longer bowed to whispers. She walked proudly beside Ade, knowing that dignity was worth more than approval. And Ade, with his quiet strength, carried their union with the same patience he gave to every machine he touched. Where others saw impossibility, he saw truth. And together, they built not just engines, but a life. One forged in respect, tested by fire, and bound by a promise that began in scorn but ended in love. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments. For more powerful stories of dignity, justice, and courage from Black lives, make sure to subscribe and stay with us. Your support keeps these voices alive.